Somali Nexus. Lighting the path of heritage.
For most of the historical record, Egypt was not ruled by a Somali state. That part is clear. But the fuller picture is more interesting than a simple yes or no. Over a very long span of time, groups from the Horn of Africa and later families of Somali origin appear in Egyptian history as trading partners, military allies and enemies, frontier rulers, and members of the intellectual elite. The evidence supports influence, pressure, and at times real power inside Egypt, but not a unified Somali dynasty ruling the whole country. The earliest chapter in that story begins with Punt. Egyptian sources treated Punt as a real place of major economic value, not as a legend. Expeditions brought back incense, myrrh, gold, ebony, and other goods that mattered to temple ritual and royal prestige. Modern scholarship generally places Punt in the Horn of Africa, likely in northern Somalia and nearby areas. That makes the connection between Egypt and the Somali Peninsula very old, though trade by itself should not be mistaken for political control. What gives this relationship a sharper political edge is a source from around 1570 BCE. The inscription of Sobeknakht II describes a major attack on Upper Egypt carried out by the Kingdom of Kush and allies from Punt. That account matters because it shows Punt not just as a supplier of luxury goods, but as a participant in a serious military campaign reaching deep into the Nile Valley. The evidence supports a large-scale southern assault during a period of Egyptian weakness. It does not support the claim that Punt permanently took over Egypt. The well-known reliefs of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, carved roughly a century later, point in a different direction. They present Punt through the language of royal display. Foreign rulers, exotic goods, distinctive houses, trees, and landscapes all folded into a narrative that magnified Egyptian prestige. Those carvings are valuable, especially for what they reveal about Puntite rulers such as Parahu and Ati. But they also have to be read carefully. They are reliable for contact and detail, less reliable when they imply submission, because they were designed to glorify the Egyptian court. The strongest case for direct control inside Egyptian territory comes much later, in late antiquity. As Roman authority weakened, the Blemmyes became a major force across the eastern desert, lower Nubia, and southern Egypt. The dossier places them within a wider Cushitic context, related especially to the ancestors of the Beja, and more broadly to populations of the Horn. By this stage, they were not just appearing in Roman sources as raiders. The evidence indicates a more organized political structure with rulers, local authority, and the ability to hold territory. That matters because this is where Horn-related power moved beyond contact and into sovereignty. Records from the frontier show Blemmyan kings and chiefs functioning as political actors whom Rome had to negotiate with. In periods of Roman retreat, they occupied parts of Upper Egypt and exerted control over places such as Thebes and Berenike. This was not rule over the whole of Egypt, and it should not be described that way. But it was real control over Egyptian cities and southern routes, and it stands as the clearest example in the record of a related Cushitic population exercising sovereign power within Egypt. Even then, the limits are important. The Blemmyan state was regional, not national in the modern sense. Its strength came from frontier geography, control of desert routes, and the weakening of imperial authority. Scholars describe this as a form of nomadic or frontier statehood, which fits the evidence better than a story of total conquest. The southern Nile fringe and the Red Sea corridor were the zones where that power operated most effectively. The 25th dynasty is often pulled into this discussion, but the dossier is careful on that point, and it should be. The dynasty that ruled Egypt from 747 to 656 BCE was Nubian or Kushite, based in what is now Sudan. Broader linguistic labels can make these histories seem closer than they were, but geography and political origin matter. However one frames the larger Afro-Asiatic or Cushitic world, the 25th dynasty should not be presented as Somali rule over Egypt. In the Islamic and Ottoman periods, the pattern changes again. What we see now is not military pressure from the frontier, but integration into Egypt's scholarly and administrative core. Through networks tied to Zayla and the Horn, Somali scholars established a visible presence in Cairo. At Al-Azhar, the Riwaq al-Zayla created a durable institutional base for students and scholars from that region. This was not sovereignty in a territorial sense, but it was a meaningful route into influence. That trajectory reaches its clearest form in the Jabarti family. By the 18th century, Hassan al-Jabarti had become an important religious authority in Egypt. His son, al-Rahman al-Jabarti, would become the leading chronicler of his age and a participant in the Cairo Council formed during the French occupation. That does not make him a ruler in the dynastic sense, but it does place a man of Somali descent near the center of Egyptian political and intellectual life at a critical historical moment. His importance also extends beyond office. Al-Jabarti's chronicle remains one of the essential sources for the history of Egypt during the Ottoman and French transition. In that sense, Somali-linked influence in Egypt was not only administrative but historical as well. Part of the foundational narrative of modern Egypt was recorded by someone whose own family traced its origin back to the Horn. Taken together, the evidence points to a pattern that is both narrower and more substantial than popular claims usually suggest. There was no unified Somali conquest of Egypt, no Somali pharaonic dynasty, and no basis for saying that Somalia ruled the entire country. But there is solid evidence that Horn-based populations and Somali-origin families played important roles in Egyptian history at several levels. Punt appears as a long-term partner, and at least once as part of a southern military threat. The Blemmyes held real power in parts of Upper Egypt. The Jabartis reached the upper ranks of Egyptian scholarly and political life. So the most defensible conclusion is also the most measured one. Somalia did not rule Egypt as a whole. Yet across trade, war, frontier sovereignty, and elite integration, people from the Horn were not peripheral to Egyptian history. At key moments, they were participants in it, challengers to it, and in the South and in Cairo alike, part of the structure through which Egyptian power was contested and understood.
Thank you for watching Somali Nexus. Together, we light the path of heritage. Please subscribe for more.